Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films. Getting ready for week one, finally here of the regular season. The Ravens hosting the Houston Texans this Sunday at home, right here at M&T Bank Stadium. And here to talk with me today, I looked at your bio, Pete
Mhm.
Gilbert from WBAL. Pete, I'm going to just ask this or say it as bluntly as possible. You've been on my TV for 20 years now. Is that correct?
It will be 20 years officially in this December. So, yes. And what's funny is I started actually as an intern at WBAL 27 years ago, and then went out some jobs, a few different jobs, one in Missoula, Montana, one in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and one in Lancaster, PA, before getting back to where I always wanted to get back to, back here to home. And so I've been very fortunate to be just about 20 years here at WBAL.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's a tough business, Pete. Like that speaks to your work. I'm sure some good fortune as well along the way.
A
But
lot of good fortune. There is no doubt about that.
yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just so used to you being on TV, and I've gotten the pleasure to know you on Ken's show. It was nice to catch up with you during the draft. That's kind of my thing, and then you know, just to have you here. And I looked, and I'm just doing my pre-show. I'm like, man, really, 20 years ago, that
I know.
flies.
How can a guy that looks this young have been right?
That's what I'm saying. Good looking man. I like to say that about myself all the
Jeez.
time too, Pete.
Oh man.
So exciting time here in Baltimore, though. Not just with the Ravens, but the Orioles playing the way they are. Like, do you remember when's the last time you feel like you've had this excitement here covering the Baltimore sports scene? It just seems kind of
2014. 2014, no doubt. That the Orioles win the division that year, won 96 games, and there was a crossover moment where at M&T Bank Stadium, where the Ravens had a bunch of the Oriole players come to the game, come out to midfield, and just there's nothing Baltimore sports fans love more than when their two teams are A, doing well, and B, enjoying it together. And that the chills that come when you and the way people light up when talking about that possibility. And it is very, very exciting to have that once again. And you have two teams that are incredibly likable. There are been times when you have teams that are very good, but it can be tough to swallow at times. And it's just not the case in either of these groups. And I actually wonder almost a little bit, are they too nice? Are these both teams a little too nice? Is that going to bite them at some point? But I say that a little facetiously, maybe not all facetiously, but it's awesome. And to go back to 2014, when you think of the Ravens were twice with two touchdown leads that season in the playoffs and a division round at New England. Still can't believe Joe threw that ball. That was picked off in the end zone. I was standing about 5 yards from where it was picked off in the end zone at that point. And the Orioles getting swept in the ALCS, but having swept the Tigers beforehand. Just some moments that in my career, in terms of things I got to go cover, that were really high up on the list. So that was a great year, and that was a lot of fun.
it was a great year. It was good to see Roquan in the clubhouse too. Getting to know some of the Orioles, you could tell that
Not
they
throwing
knew
the first
him.
pitch though. Woo! That was rough.
Yes, yes, yes. Wasn't quite 50 Cent though, Pete.
No,
Wasn't,
that's fair.
but it wasn't Ed Reed. Ed Reed's first pitch. We need a
No,
new Oriole bird. We might need a new Oriole bird competition. I'm gonna try. I might try out for that next year, Pete. So we'll keep an
well,
eye on
someone
that.
ought to, because that was embarrassing. I mean, Ed went up there, threw some cheese, and I mean that bird was not ready for it.
Not
That was
ready for it.
hilarious.
I wish I could show it here on YouTube and put it over, but I think that'll get copyrighted, so I'll just cut with that.
Someone
So,
might get on
so,
you for that. Yeah.
so Pete, let's get down to business here. Something I'm keeping my eye on. And I noticed also doing the research. You and I are like we both have J.K. Dobbins on our fantasy team. I ended up getting him in the fourth round, Pete. Now it's only a 10-man league. This is my friend's league. We've been together for a long time, 21st year, but it wasn't a homer pick. I say that because I really believe this is JK's backfield now, more so than it would have been in the past under Greg Roman. I just feel like the scheme is fit for him. I've said before that I'm unsure about Gus's role. I feel good about Justice Hill. Do you have the same kind of feeling that J.K. Dobbins, if he plays well, which we expect him to do, could be more of a clear number one in this backfield this year?
Yeah, if he is truly all the way back health wise, if we can see him have that top gear once again, which is what he was missing down the stretch last year. He had the initial burst, but couldn't hit the Jets. I don't see how he's not one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the league this year. What doesn't he possess? He can outrun you. He can make you miss. He can run through you. He can catch the ball, and he can pass block. He does all those things very well. And you think about what Todd Monken wants to do and have things spread out more. There are going to be more lanes for him to enjoy, more room to roam, and all those things just bode well. And he is the best for those. You mentioned, it's interesting. How does Gus Edwards fit in this? I'm not entirely sure. You assume that he's the number 2 running back, right? But watching what we saw out of Justice Hill in the preseason, the way they used him and knowing what kind of scheme they're going to, Justice may be a better fit as a number 2 running back in this. And Gus is a short yardage, sledgehammer, third and goal at the 1 kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not 100% sure that Gus is as back as JK is knee-wise. I don't feel like I've seen the burst from him that we had seen. Gus really did have it. He was, for a man as large as he is, he could burst, and he could make a 1 cut and just be gone. And he had, you think of the game against the Giants a couple of years ago, he just, dominated that team. So, but I'm not sure that he's all the way back yet. And if that's the case, and then you think of what Keaton Mitchell might be able to bring not too much farther down the road once he gets, off the initial IR. It will be very interesting, but I think it is clear that JK is the number 1. I know Todd Monken was very excited to get him out there for practice. He was not excited about how long he had to wait for that to happen. But once he got out there and saw the things he can do, and just watching the lateral movement, all that is blazing at a practice. And watched him sprint. Again, it's hard to tell me standing there watching him go. I don't have a stop. But he looks. There was no hitch in the giddy up. There was no favoring of a knee or anything, and that to me was really significant. And therefore I'm looking around and I'm seeing where he was available in fantasy leagues. I'm like, yeah, did you forget? I found it kind of bad. Again, not a homer pick. This guy is a star. He's a game breaker, and he should be ready to do that, particularly in this offense.
Yeah, you talked about his versatility, and that stands out with JK a lot. I think, though, Pete, he needs to catch the ball. I think that's something that he needs to put behind him, some drops and some big moments. But he can catch the ball. We've seen that. But you mentioned it. As soon as he came back last year, and he wasn't close to 100%, you saw the vision, you saw the patience, you saw the contact balance still there. There were some moves where I've watched so much tape, Pete, where I know that he was favoring the one leg. And in the past, he would have planted on that leg and moved laterally, and he really couldn't do that. He really could. It was more of a spin off and that kind of thing, to where his movement was. And then obviously in the open field, Pete, you saw him once he got in the open field, pretty much dragging his one leg. So, if he's even close to what he was, he was effective last year. If he's even close to what he was before that gruesome injury, sky's the limit. And I've asked a lot of people about Gus because, I'm a big Gus fan myself, and no one seems to know. No one has a really firm idea on what his role would be. You hear a lot, he's going to close out games, this kind of thing. And I could see that. But yes, Keaton Mitchell, what can you say on Keaton Mitchell as far as, I know you can't really give away anything, but how he was used in practice, could you see him like being a legitimate piece of this offense once he comes off of IR, or somebody goes down in the running back room?
I still want to wait and see. You got to see it in a real game before you get a sense of, is this guy going to be ready to meet the moment? We've seen that with so many different guys that have looked great in the summer, and he looked great this summer. He made guys miss. He showed great burst. The lateral quickness, and he showed strength too. Not just, he didn't go down the second he was touched. So all those things certainly hugely in his favor. And it was kind of surprising he wasn't drafted. So I think that he can, but you don't know until he gets out there, in a game and makes it happen. Is he going to be Isaiah Pacheco? And, he was a 7th rounder, of that same kind of ilk, and just get out there and be like, oh, that's a playmaker. Or, is he going to be one of the many backs that we've seen come through the years? We thought, look at that speed guy. He's made a great third down back, and then we never hear from him again.
I saw a tendency of him to not stick with the run and bounce outside, but he gets away with it. His speed is real, Pete. And I don't think that us in Baltimore have seen what he can do with he's not a one-speed runner. He can lull you to sleep and then turn that corner. I saw that a lot in his college tape. And you mentioned his toughness. I think it was the Texas game I watched it. They were overmatched on the offensive line. And this guy was not afraid, Keaton Mitchell, to stick his nose in. I mean, he was the do-it-all back. So we're talking 3rd and 1s, goal line touches, getting that extra push, using that leverage kind of like in a Ray Rice way, getting really low, not as powerful as Ray Rice, but still fearless, taking the right angle, real good feel for the game. So you were out of training camp a good bit, asking some questions. I wanted to ask you, we've heard different names, but I want to get it from you, your guy, because you have – okay, I think this about this guy. I think this about that guy. And then you go watch him in training camp. Who surprised you the most, Pete, in a good way? Who'd you stood out and be like, man, I expected him to do okay, but he's really standing out here in practice?
Well, I mean, Malik Ham was somebody who I was interested in OTAs much more for the fact that went to Baltimore City College. I'm like, oh, anytime you get a local kid on the team, you want, let's see what kind of story. And I'm thinking, well, I better do the story now, because you probably won't be around, just the realities of the undrafted, guys, and then the pedigree of Baltimore City College and Lafayette doesn't scream NFL star. So to watch him consistently make plays, to watch him in the joint practices and go up against other guys and, oh, okay, you're getting by them too. The spin move against Philly for a sack in the first preseason game was absolutely remarkable, because of the balance he showed with it and the speed at which he did it. And, it's one thing, it's why I talk about these guys. Well, how come they just don't do that move or do that move? Well, it's hard to do that move really well and be effective with it. And for a guy still as raw as he is to make a move that polished, that certainly made me, that piqued my interest for sure. Again, disappointing that he's, going to miss the first 4 games, just because I think at this point, Ajabo and Owe, you want to think they're going to be there and be the guys, but I'm not sold. And I kept waiting for Ajabo in the preseason games to do something other than just try to bull rush somebody or do something. And I don't know if he's just like, I'm not showing anything. Maybe that's all a ruse. That's you don't want to read too much of anything, good or bad, out of what you watch during the summer. But they're going to need this pass rush. Bowser is still not back. Not sure how, watching him limp into camp, I was like, whoa. And with his injury history, what percent is he going to be? I mean, Jadeveon Clowney certainly, you would think at this point, a pitch count kind of guy. So there's room for someone to step up, and they're going to get an opportunity. And Ham showed that potential this summer that maybe he could be one of those guys.
And some of it, Pete, is in football, coaches think that they can coach people up, but there's some factor of you got it or you don't. And with Malik Ham, there's some natural ability there. Like you said, there's one thing to do a spin move in practice against your teammates, practice it in open air on a bag, but to have the confidence to be able to do a move like that, it just comes natural to some people. And that's on Ajabo, by the way, part of the reason I'm not worried about him at all personally, because I've seen him do it in games at Michigan. I've seen that burst. I've seen the spin move. I've seen the cross chop. I've seen the dip. Like, he's got it all. I do think that he was keeping it vanilla in training camp, but it's a legitimate point. You need pass rush, especially in Mike Macdonald's scheme, where he's relying on that front 4 to get home so he can clog the passing lanes. And we saw an uptick last year, Pete, interceptions, sacks, batted passes. Not sure if that's exactly was an uptick, but it seemed like we batted a lot of passes down last year and clogging those passing lanes instead of trying to trick quarterbacks. And I like that, but you need your front 4 to get home. Super encouraging for Malik Ham, because you never know where these guys come from and who can emerge. So I think he'll play significant snaps. He looks like a more natural pass rusher to me than, say, even Tavius Robinson, who was drafted. You mentioned Clowney on a pitch count. It's going to be important to get that rush with Matabike, Travis Jones. Thoughts on the defensive tackles, because we look like we have a big, strong, deep group there.
as much as you maybe are unsure about the edge, just because we haven't really seen it in a lot of game action. Interior wise, that's I don't know how you're going to run the ball on Michael Pierce. How you're going to run the ball on Travis Jones, Matabike. They are. It's a spectacular interior defense. And Broderick Washington, you put him in there as well. There's a reason he got a contract extension. I mean, that is as good a good four group, inside as you're going to find. And I think that will help cover up a few holes and allow some opportunities for guys to, maybe make some plays on the edge, because so much attention will have to be paid the guys coming up the middle. And there will also then be a lot more room for Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith to come through those gaps and go make plays, because they will swallow dudes up. And I think Matabike is funny. His rookie year, he's looking good. And then a year ago, heading into year two, some national pundit put him in the top 5 for NFL Defensive Player of the Year. I thought, well, that seems like a bit of a reach. And he clearly didn't have any kind of year like that. But we did see progress. And now it's like year 3, I feel like he's fully healthy. He fully understands it. I think he is ready for a monster year. So you go along with all these guys. Again, as you mentioned before, it's dependent upon health. Michael Pierce, you want to see him out there, and that's been the bugaboo with him. But he is one really super strong man, and with such a low center of gravity, and with Travis Jones, it's just a really nice interior.
It really is. And the middle of this defense, Pete, I might have to do a video on this later this week. But I'm just talking about straight up the middle. It's an old baseball term. You want to be strong up the middle. This team is really strong up the middle. It's one of the strengths of the team. You look at the defensive tackles that you just talked about. Behind them, you have all-pro Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen allowed to play free. And then behind them, you have Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams. I mean, it really doesn't get much better than those 4 behind the defensive line. And I think this is really going to help Mike Macdonald in his versatility. And basically, Pete, a lot of times when another team brings in 2 tight ends or an extra fullback, or say, you have to go to that 3-4 look. You have to match the linebackers and get heavy. With our front 4 and the 2 linebackers behind them, and oh, by the way, Kyle Hamilton lurking in the box, those 7 guys can stop the run. Versus, you don't have to necessarily get heavier to stop the run in these basic situations. So I think that's really going to pay off for Mike Macdonald. My one concern, though, Pete, the edge containment. Was not happy with the edge containment. Preseason or not, you want to see your edges force things inside, especially when you got assets like Roquan and PQ. So that's something to watch. Can't get beat around the edge, Pete.
Yeah, that happened, 5-6 times where you're like, is there any edge at all? Just inside moves with nobody adjusting to it. And you got to work in concert with one another, and they weren't doing that a lot in the preseason. So it's worth being, I don't know if concerned, but noting it now, and we'll see if that's okay. Is that just what they're doing? He's like, I'm just going to work on a move regardless, of where my teammates are. That's and that's kind of what might happen during a preseason game. So I don't worry. I'm not that concerned yet. You do have to still be concerned, much more so week 2 than week 1 when it comes to just your pass defense. And I just, I would be surprised if Marlon is out there to face the Bengals. And then you're looking at, Rock Ya-Sin and Ronald Darby as your starting corners. And while Darby is shockingly how good he looks, considering he's 10 months from an ACL, I'm like, wait, you shouldn't really be able to move that well. But is it going to hold up? Again, I've been fooled before on watching guys in August practice and just thinking that they moved well. So that's a lot there, and an awful lot there to deal with. So that's early on, finding a way to and that's where I do like Mike Macdonald. He went through that fire early a year ago, where the secondary was struggling, and then fixed it. And they've really done. I mean, you look the next 2 times against the Bengals, really all 3 times against the Bengals last year, did a nice job against them defensively. And so if he doesn't have Humphrey there, though, I'm not sure how easy that is. It had to replicate, but that will be we'll kind of get a really good sense of what Mike is like as a coordinator week 2 and how well he is able to cover up, what are going to be deficiencies against one of the best, pass offenses that exist in the NFL.
So quick follow-up on Marlon. I kind of like I'm holding the door open or hoping at least that week 2 would be a relative return. Okay, maybe he's coming back to practice. If not this week, the next. Give him a couple of weeks to ramp up, maybe even give us 20 snaps. I'm being a little aggressive with that, in your opinion.
It's just a little bit, and I think, I had a different foot surgery, a much more invasive one than Marlon had. But I mean, anytime you start cutting on the foot, that takes time, and 4 weeks feels awfully fast to be out of practice. They obviously weren't concerned about it the day before he had the surgery. He's standing there at the podium with us having a regular media session, which is why it was so surprising to learn that he was going to do that. It didn't really see signs of something that needed to be taken care of. Obviously, there was something there that they thought could have, spiraled into something that was going to be a real problem. So they manage it now. But I just think anytime you go in there, maybe everything goes perfect and you're a little ahead of schedule. And he could be out there for week 2. I feel like that's a little, I don't know, optimistic at this point.
Understood. I appreciate the information because, who knows what it is, and they're not going to tell us, and I don't want
right.
to.
And that's all speculation on my point. Just
right.
What I've seen over the years, what I've seen out of Marlon, what I've seen where they are, and how they want to approach this thing. And I know with a big picture mentality, 17-game season, rushing a guy back in week 2 is probably not what they're going to do. I mean, maybe it's not rushed back. Maybe he's ready 100% to go, and bang, he's out there. And that's what you're certainly hoping for.
Right. And as much as we like to have information, I kind of like not having it. I don't want to give anybody else any, the competitor in you. So, Pete, a lot has been said, especially recently, about the vibe of this team. And I don't want to go too much back into last year, but obviously, the injuries in 2021 carried over into 2022. The team never seemed fully healthy. Then Lamar goes down again. And, there's all this stuff behind the scenes allegedly going on in the locker room where it's just not the happiest place, not exactly 2019. But fast forward to this year, contract done, new coordinator change seems like a big positive to this team, to the players in this team, their morale. New receivers, excitement with OBJ, excitement with Zay Flowers. Do you notice the vibe, the intangible on this team that other reporters have noticed, and can you describe it for us?
It's entirely different than 6 months ago or 8 months ago. You go back to January. So 8 months. There was absolute frustration from a lot of players in that locker room with Lamar Jackson. Frustration not because they didn't think that he wasn't hurt, but because they didn't know. Because he kept it under wraps even in the locker room. Players didn't know what was going on. I had several players tell me, off camera, like we don't know, and they're like, we're trying to make a run here. We feel like we can make a run, but we don't know what's going on with Lamar, and that was frustrating. So, and the injuries just collectively had carried over. You felt snake bit again and again. Then you go through the beginning of the off season, and it's you see Steve Saunders. They're like, what are we going to do with him? Well, you got to make a change there. I think that was the first step, and I think in a direction that said, all right, we can't continue with status quo. We're going to have to do something different. And so they did that. And then we saw the report card come out, and you see it was an F for him. And it was 3 weeks later, right, that came out. I was like, oh, well, that needed to be done. And John Harbaugh is very loyal, and that's an amazing trait to have, because it's certainly that is a big reason of how he has gotten to where he is, by being loyal to people and have people being loyal to him. But it can also go too far, and I think it had with Steve Saunders, and they kind of collectively like we got to do something here, and he saw it too and recognized it. And
Pete, I want to interrupt here for a second. Yeah. I apologize, but man, you're just hitting on some good stuff. Look, Steve Saunders may be great at his job, and and this, that, and the other, but if the players are unanimously, almost like with that report card, unhappy with the strength and conditioning coach, then as a coach, you have to make a choice. You can't have, it doesn't matter if you like the guy so much. If your team, the players who are working with them don't like him or that much, an F, is what he was given. F minus. I don't even know. It was some crazy responses that you have to part with him. Harbaugh's loyalty has been a hot topic for me. You look at the Mark Ingram and the token starts he was getting when JK was ready to take a next step. Matt Skura, as we saw with Nick Boyle last year, nothing in the tank. He will be loyal, and like you said, it works for him a lot. But it is also like you're married to Harbaugh. He's been with us for so long. The same things tend to get on your nerves a little bit. So the culture for the Ravens overall is great. I'm happy with John Harbaugh, but I had to interrupt my personal thoughts there because yes, it does get frustrating at times. With Nick Boyle and in some other instances where there's been players who didn't have it. And Greg Roman was one for me where it just became obvious that we needed to turn Lamar loose and let have a happier quarterback. So go ahead. But yeah, this year, totally different.
Well, yeah. So, and also, another different thing is to spend like that on Lamar. Just give a $260 million contract. That's new. That's a big deal. So they did get outside, and then, then you can point to probably the next meaningful turning point, Steve Bisciotti calling Odell Beckham Jr. And I didn't know, I didn't, again, from the outside looking at kind of like knew OBJ was a great player. And I knew that he had developed a following. He transcended sports into a pop culture kind of icon, but also seemed like a prima donna, also seemed like a pain in the ass from the outside looking in. And I watch the way his teammates in Baltimore are like amazed with this man. They are like, oh my gosh, you are him. And it's not because of the 17 million Instagram followers or whatever. It's because of the astounding amount of work he put into the way he prepares and prepped his body and the way he works at practice before, after, during all of it. They're like, oh, this is that dude. I was shocked at how physically impressive he was. I just didn't think, I thought I was going to see a slowish guy who's going to, really take it easy, not try and break, out of route. No, he looked like it. His legs are unbelievably strong. No hint of any favoring of a knee. 2 ACL. He played without an ACL. He is that guy. And it's so important for Zay Flowers. It's so important for a Nelson Aguilar, for a Devin Duvernay, for a Tyler Wallace, for all those guys to be, and for Bateman to be in that room with him, and they see that they see who is someone I don't care where he is, the ADI for fantasy football. They're like, he's one of the dudes. He's one of the best. And we're watching him, and they're seeing him in practice make plays, and then he's telling them about how to make plays. And it means the world to him. So you have that kind of congealing, personality along with Lamar, who is now everyone's back, on board with him. And it does they'll just feel like all steam to go, full engines. Let's go. It's ready to rock and roll. And that's where they are. They get through camp. There's no serious injuries. There's nothing, no disastrous, you get through a whole training camp of preseason. So it does feel like they have turned a page and are ready for more of a 2019 level of performance. I'm not saying a 14 or 15 or a 15-2 kind of record necessarily, but they feel that they are there ready to be one of those, AFC bullies at the least.
Very good, very good. And I'm a big believer in Odell Beckham's leadership. Besides the intangible that you're talking about, but leaders lead differently. We saw it was a big believer in Ed Reed's ability as a leader, different than Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis got the attention. He was obviously a good leader, a great leader, one of the best of all time. But Ed Reed, don't take away from his style of leadership and how he organized the guys. Odell Beckham, to me, seems more of maybe a leader within the week. Like Lamar seems like, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to work with the offensive coordinator now, which is great. But maybe not the guy to get into people's faces to motivate them during the week. He just seems like Lamar is going to do his thing and guys are going to rally around him. Odell Beckham seems like a guy that maybe he's a different leader. Everybody's different. So I'm excited for the leadership. Obviously, I'm reading too much into that. not, but I just see it that way. If I had to guess, I would say during the week, Odell's going to be on them and motivate them and get their heads right, what they need to do that week. I could just see it, the kind of like an alpha personality that I think you need from your playmakers.
It's interesting because it never, we never saw him get on anyone during camp, during practice. But the way he went about his business, there was such great attention to detail in every little thing that he did on the practice field. That was the leadership. They're like, guys, this is how you do it. All right. And, this is how I got to be one of the very best. And he also wanted to point out to him, I still am. He enjoyed making, some catches. Again, the one hand, everyone can make a one-handed catch now, right? But nobody does it quite like he does. And he liked to show that to them. And he didn't, I mean, now there may be a point during the season where, he's not going to be shy about stepping in and be like, look, you're doing that wrong. This is the way it needs to be done. He will have no hesitation in doing that. But he hadn't had to do that from during the times that I watched a lot of practice, and I watched a lot of the receivers up close because of just the way that they set up the practice. We were able to stand right next to these guys going through their drills, and you can overhear the conversations. And there was never any sort of getting in anyone's face on anything. Keith Williams occasionally, that would be his job, he was happy to do that. But whenever Odell did anything, all eyes were on him, not just from us, but from his teammates too.
Right. And he doesn't have to say much. I'm not going to say that he's there to be a policeman. I'm just saying he's a competitive person.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely competitive person. And when it's Bengals week and stuff didn't go well the week before or whatever, I have a feeling that Odell Beckham is going to be that guy that people are going to look to. Even more than the quarterback. He's that big of a figure, as you pointed to. So Pete, week 1, obviously, every game that the Ravens play, we want to see them win. We want to see everybody stay healthy. But especially early in the season, Pete, there are signs that you want to see, signs for the future. So if I could narrow it down for you to ask you for one thing, maybe 2 things that you want to see from this team against the Texans, besides winning, besides staying healthy, what would it be?
Offensively, I want to see where the level of execution is. That's where I don't know. And I don't know that Todd Monken has a great sense of what it's going to be just yet either. And that, when you do so much drastically different, you have to assume there's going to be a level of, the just getting used to it. There's going to be some rough edges to it. I want to see where they are in that regard because, we had a better idea through the preseason of kind of some of the conceptually what you want to do. You're going to be an 11 personnel. You're going to spread things out, and it's going to be almost everything's going to be a three receiver set. But what kind of when it comes to route concepts are is there really good separation? Is there really are the guys going to be truly disciplined in their routes to follow along with it? Because if they're not, this I know that it's the route discipline. Particularly was the ability to freelance was so great under Greg Roman when it came to his offense and the routes that oftentimes they got in each other's way. Well, there's going to be some freedom for that, but there's much less so. So where are they in that regard? And does the offensive line that I assume is good, is it as good as I assume it to be? And is Lamar going to have the time to go ahead and make the proper reads and stay back there and not have to be the guy that's just running around being a spectacular athlete for it to work well, but can the offense just run smoothly without Lamar having to be spectacular?
Yeah, so we're going to need that offense to get clicking as soon as possible, Pete, because 3 of the first 5, I believe, are on the road in the division.
Which is just weird. Once I went to 17 games, it's like everything you thought you knew about what an NFL schedule would be like is just out the window. I mean, it's just what do they had? Then they got 2 road games and a London game, and all in like 4 weeks. It's just like what.
It's brutal. It's a brutal travel schedule. It really is. People look at the beginning of the season, and they see the teams, and they're like, "Well, all right, this is kind of the easy part of their schedule." Man, you're talking 4 out of 6 weeks on the road, ending in London. Yeah, that's rough. That's
And this
rough.
division, and if this division is not the best, it's second best, right? So, and you're going to
Right.
have your three road division games, before you get to London. Eesh, it's a very challenging start, and the kind of thing where, like, if you get through London at 4-2, you really feel like you're off and running and where you want to be. For 2-4, you're going to have to start looking in the mirror a little bit. So we'll know pretty early on kind of where this team is.
Hey, personally, just something. My thoughts here is I see this kind of like a 2019 season, not in the unanimous MVP and 14-2, which it was 16 games back then. Do not take it out of context. I'm just talking about the first month or so, feeling your way out, getting through this stretch that we just talked about, getting the offense on track, finding out the cornerback situation and really trying to get the pieces in, and the team in general just getting better and getting its momentum heading into the late season. So that's, if I had to guess, I would say most of the lumps that we're going to take is going to come early. I do think, Pete, though, one more thing. I apologize for keeping you, but nobody's ever seen
fun talk.
Nobody's ever seen Todd Monken with Lamar Jackson. And we saw this in 2019. Now, granted, 2019 for me was always kind of an outlier because Greg Roman's scheme is just so different. And Lamar Jackson coming out of college was just so different. So planning for that was a nightmare. They didn't know. They really started figuring it out in 2020 when we could no longer do the read option for a free 7 or 8 yards to the sideline. They finally started being like, all right, you're going to have to do something else, Greg. But comparing it to this year, nobody's ever seen Lamar and Monken. And I think that can work to our advantage.
No, it's a good point. As much as you're not sure how the Ravens are going to execute yet defensively, you're like, how do we prepare for this? I think it's particularly when you definitely feel that they're going to be much more multiple and be able to do so many different things than what they had done before. So while it was challenging to prepare for something that was different, you knew what they were going to do. Now there's much more unknown in that regard. So it will be very, very interesting to see, how defenses, if they're hesitant at all, if they just aren't, if they don't commit to doing things, and if you don't commit with the playmakers that we have in this team, and we haven't even mentioned Mark Andrews, which is kind of wild in a 40-minute or so conversation. We're not able to mention this guy who practices almost too hard, who plays angrier than any football player I think I've ever seen, and is just so badly wants to win. That's you add that into this mix too, and that's a lot.
So fans have asked me, is he frustrated at all, Pete?
Frustrated with,
okay, we got these receivers now. I'm not the number one. Is there an attitude issue?
No.
Okay.
No, the frustration that he has shown when things are not executed properly. If he doesn't execute something properly, sometimes it's mistaken that he looks angry. He's mad at himself. And he also, that stuff all he lets it all go so quickly, which you don't really know until you get a chance to talk to him after practice. And you're like, oh, he's actually, yeah, it's fine. That's just the way he plays. And, from the first day he showed up here and he practiced harder than anybody else, that's what he does. So he's not, no,
Okay.
I mean, now if he's catching 2 balls a game for 4 weeks, okay. But I truly believe he got paid. He's been in the league. He's been an all-pro. He's put up the numbers. He wants to win a Super Bowl. That is clear priority number one. And I know that he is excited about what this offense is going to do to be able to help contribute to that.
That's great to hear. That's the way I interpreted it, but I figured I would ask because I hear fans kind of trying to read too much into that. But Lamar and Mark, we saw in that stadium practice when the receivers weren't out there and Lamar wanted to produce in front of the fans. You don't want to get shut down at open stadium practice, do you? No, he was forcing that thing into Mark Andrews, and their chemistry was where it always was. So
you can still believe that when push comes to shove, if a play has to be made, 89 is going to be in the sights of number 8.
Oh, absolutely. And Mark has that knack to really just find space. It was something that stood out in college, and it stood out in college to me, and it translated beautifully. Like he has got that ability to just make himself, to find that window, whether it's an offensive lineman blocking him, blocking Lamar's view to him, or whether it's a running back in the way or whatever it is, an arm angle. He just kind of takes it all in and makes himself available to Lamar. And it's beautiful to watch. It really is. Pete, I wanted to thank you so much for being here. I guess people know where they can find you, but can you plug your work here at the end?
Sure. If you want to follow on Twitter at WBAL Pete. Really looking forward to doing Ravens Wrap Up again this year. We do that show Sunday. We do it live Sunday nights after Sunday Night Football, after the news. It's late. If you have to DVR, I understand. Please do so though and watch it, because it's the only show that is done Sunday in town that's all Ravens. That's and the NFL at this extensive amount. And Keith Mills will be back with me again. I enjoy working with him more than any person I've ever worked with. He's just an amazing human being, and we just the chemistry that we have. He's my Mark Andrews, and so it means a lot to have him back for this. We got some. We're going to jazz it up a little bit this year. It's going to be a little more a little more fun, a little more spicy. So that's late nights on WBAL TV. If you have to DVR, I forgive you.
Nothing like local coverage. I just say that not because I'm biased, but because when you watch this team and follow this team closely, and then you hear the people on the national scene who are paid to cover every single team in multiple sports,
idea.
They really don't know.
Idea.
They really don't know. So it's invaluable. This channel, Engraven, all the other guys, Coach Sip to Tally, Coach DC from all 22 cuts. I could go on and on and on with the people I learned from in this community. And it's amazing. And I'm always blessed when I have them on the channel. So, yeah, big shout out to Pete, Keith Mills. Definitely will be. I'm probably going to be on the DVR crew, though, Pete. I have to admit.
I feel you. I think that we actually are going to record one this year, the London game, since it's done so early.
Okay.
If I'm like, okay, because that also, we're fingers crossed, because I like to see, I want to cover a World Series. It's the one major event I haven't had a chance to cover yet. And game one of the ALCS is Sunday. The Ravens play in London. So you're hoping that's in Baltimore that night, which would be like to have Ravens Wrap Up taped and ready to roll for you guys while we go talk some baseball too.
All right, now I'm fired up. I say, yeah, keep the football on this channel, but I mean, hey, I'm a Baltimore kid. The stadium. If there was no such thing as traffic, I'd be there in about 10 to 15 minutes. Right outside, right here, Dundalk High. Yes, sir. So I'm right in the air, right by Jimmy's. So yeah.
Perfect.
So Pete, thank you so much. With that, I want to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. Please follow Pete at WBAL Pete. I'll put all his links in the bio here in the description so you can follow him. And, of course, watch him and Keith Mills, the Ravens centric coverage after football on Sundays. This is going to be great, Pete. I can't wait. Thanks so much for coming on.
Week one. My pleasure. Take care, Jace.
All right. Thank you.